Have you ever felt afraid of someone? Not because they were louder than everyone else, but because their presence alone made people hesitate. In this video, you will discover why the most dangerous version of yourself is not violent, emotional, or chaotic, but calm, controlled, and fully awake. You will understand how fear is created psychologically, why society trains people to suppress their real power, and how the version of you that you tried to hide for years may actually be the one capable of changing your entire life. By the end of this journey, you may begin to see yourself differently forever. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, turn on the notification bell, and write in the comments, "I am no longer afraid of myself," because the person you feared most may already be living inside you. Most people spend their entire lives running away from themselves, not from failure, not from pain, from themselves, from the strange feeling that appears when they sit alone in silence and suddenly realize there is something inside them they do not fully understand, something powerful, something dangerous, something capable of destroying the weak identity they built just to survive. And instead of exploring it, they bury it. They distract themselves. They become addicted to noise, validation, routines, and comfort because deep down they are terrified of meeting the version of themselves that no longer asks for permission. As a child, you were probably taught that being agreeable made you a good person. Stay quiet. Do not challenge authority. Do not make people uncomfortable. Smile even when you are angry. Forgive even when you are betrayed. Lower your voice. Lower your ambitions. Lower your intensity. Slowly, without realizing it, you learned how to amputate parts of your personality just to be accepted. But buried emotions do not disappear. Buried power does not vanish. It waits. And one day, life begins to pressure you enough that the mask starts to crack. Maybe betrayal changed you. Maybe loneliness changed you. Maybe years of being underestimated created something cold inside you. Suddenly, you notice that your patience is disappearing, your tolerance for fake people is shrinking, your desire to explain yourself is dying, and that scares you because you think you are becoming a worse person. But what if that is not evil? What if it is awakening? There's a version of you that does not beg for respect, a version that no longer fears rejection, a version that can walk away without looking back. Most people never meet this version because they keep numbing themselves before transformation can happen. They mistake self betrayal for kindness, they confuse weakness with morality. But true power is not cruelty. True power is control. The dangerous person is not the loudest person in the room. The dangerous person is the one who has emotional discipline, the one who can stay calm while others collapse emotionally, the one who sees manipulation immediately, the one who no longer needs approval to make decisions. That is the person living inside you. And the frightening part is that you have already felt glimpses of this version before. Moments where you suddenly became fearless. Moments where your mind became incredibly sharp under pressure. Moments where you stopped caring what others thought and felt strangely free. Those moments were not accidents, they were leaks, cracks in the old identity, evidence that something much stronger has been trying to emerge for years. Society often fears powerful individuals not because they are violent, but because they are difficult to control. A person who understands themselves deeply becomes unpredictable to systems built on insecurity. When you no longer need constant validation, advertising loses power over you. Manipulators lose power over you. Toxic relationships lose power over you. Fear loses power over you. And that independence terrifies people who built their comfort around your weakness. Think carefully about your life. How many times were you rewarded for staying small? How many times did people become uncomfortable the moment you became more confident, more disciplined, more direct? Sometimes the people around you do not actually want your growth. They want your familiarity. They want the version of you they can predict and emotionally manage. The moment you evolve, you remind them of everything they avoided becoming themselves. That is why transformation feels lonely, because the stronger you become internally, the more disconnected you feel from shallow environments. Conversations become repetitive, fake smiles become exhausting, drama becomes unbearable. You stop craving attention because your focus shifts toward mastery, toward peace, toward control. And people may call you cold during this phase, but often what they are really witnessing is the death of your dependency. Inside every human being, there are two identities fighting constantly. One identity seeks comfort, safety, and social approval. The other seeks truth, growth, and freedom. The first identity wants you accepted. The second wants you awakened. And most people sacrifice awakening just to avoid discomfort. But discomfort is where your real self begins. The hidden person inside you is not evil. It is simply honest. Honest about your anger. Honest about your ambitions. Honest about your limits. Honest about what you tolerate and what you no longer tolerate. For years, you may have tried to silence this inner voice because you feared becoming selfish, arrogant, or dangerous. But suppressing your instincts completely creates another danger, becoming weak enough for the world to consume you. There is a reason some people seem impossible to manipulate. They are connected to themselves. They know exactly who they are. They are not constantly negotiating their values just to keep others comfortable. And because of that, their energy feels intense. Not because they are trying to intimidate anyone, but because certainty itself intimidates people. The version of you that scares you most may actually be the version capable of saving your life. The version that finally says no. The version that stops chasing. The version that chooses discipline over pleasure. The version that walks away from disrespect immediately. The version that stops explaining every decision. The version that can sit alone without feeling empty. The version that understands silence is sometimes more powerful than words. Most people never become powerful because they are too attached to being liked. But being liked and being respected are not the same thing. Respect often begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself for others. And yes, that transformation changes your relationships. Some people disappear when they realize they can no longer manipulate your emotions. Others suddenly accuse you of changing. But they are right. You did change. You became aware. Awareness is dangerous. Once you see manipulation, you cannot unsee it. Once you see your own potential, mediocrity becomes painful. Once you experience self-respect, self-betrayal becomes unbearable. And this is where the real internal war begins, because awakening does not instantly make life easier. In fact, at first, it often makes life harder. You begin questioning everything: your friendships, your habits, your addictions, your fears, your excuses. You begin realizing how much of your personality was built for survival instead of truth. And tearing down a false identity is psychologically exhausting because the ego would rather suffer in familiarity than evolve into uncertainty. But something extraordinary happens when you continue anyway. You stop reacting emotionally to everything. You stop needing revenge because distance becomes enough. You stop proving yourself constantly because your actions become your language. You stop fearing solitude because solitude starts rebuilding your mind. And slowly, the person you feared begins becoming the person you trust most. Not because you became emotionless, not because you became ruthless, but because you finally integrated the parts of yourself you spent years hiding from the world. The calm intensity, the ambition, the boundaries, the discipline, the silent confidence, the ability to survive alone, the ability to walk through pain without collapsing. That is real power. And the terrifying truth is that most people around you may never fully understand this transformation because they only knew the old version of you, the agreeable version, the exhausted version, the emotionally dependent version. But deep inside, another person was always watching quietly, waiting for the moment you finally became tired of betraying yourself. That hidden person watched every humiliation you stayed silent through, every moment you accepted less than you deserved just to avoid conflict, every night you pretended to be okay while your mind was collapsing in private. It watched you shrink yourself to protect other people's comfort, and with every compromise, it grew more restless inside you. Because there comes a point where the human soul can no longer tolerate living against its own nature. At first, the transformation is subtle. You begin enjoying silence more than conversation. You stop responding immediately to every message. You start observing people instead of emotionally attaching to them. You notice patterns, tone changes, fake concern, hidden disrespect disguised as jokes. For the first time, you stop looking at words and start looking at behavior. That alone changes everything. Most people reveal themselves through repetition. The manipulator repeats guilt. The insecure person repeats competition. The liar repeats inconsistency. The attention seeker repeats performance. But the awakened person repeats discipline. And discipline is where your hidden power begins becoming visible. Not motivation, not temporary inspiration, Discipline. Because motivation depends on feelings, but discipline functions independently of emotion. The dangerous version of yourself does not wait to feel ready. It acts despite fear, despite exhaustion, despite uncertainty. That is why disciplined individuals appear intimidating. Their emotions no longer control their direction. Imagine what your life would look like if your emotions stopped dominating your decisions. How much time would you recover? How much energy would you save? How many toxic attachments would disappear naturally? Most suffering comes from emotional dependence. Dependence on validation, dependence on attention, dependence on being understood by everyone. But the moment you become internally stable, the world loses many of its psychological weapons against you. Suddenly, rejection no longer destroys you. Silence no longer scares you. Loneliness no longer weakens you. Criticism no longer controls you. And that freedom feels almost unreal at first. People who fear their own inner power usually misunderstand it. They think becoming strong means becoming cold-hearted, but strength without awareness becomes arrogance. Real internal power is balanced. It allows you to remain kind without becoming weak, calm without becoming passive, confident without becoming narcissistic. That balance is rare. Most people swing between extremes, either overly submissive or aggressively defensive, either emotionally dependent or emotionally numb. But the most psychologically powerful people exist in the middle. They can love deeply without losing themselves. They can walk away without hatred. They can remain calm while setting brutal boundaries when necessary. And boundaries are another form of self-respect most people never master. When you begin protecting your energy, some people accuse you of changing, but access to you was never supposed to be unlimited. Not everyone deserves your vulnerability. Not everyone deserves your time. Not everyone deserves explanations. One of the biggest signs that your inner transformation has started is this: you become harder to emotionally provoke. Before, one insult could ruin your entire day. One rejection could destroy your confidence. One betrayal could consume your thoughts for months. Now, you observe more, react less, detach faster. Not because you stopped feeling emotions, but because you finally stopped letting emotions control your identity. That is when people begin sensing something different about you. Your presence changes. Your eyes change. Your energy changes. You no longer enter rooms seeking approval. You enter rooms observing reality. And strangely, the less validation you seek, the more people notice you. Because calm certainty is magnetic. There is something psychologically unsettling about a person who is fully comfortable alone. Society conditions people to fear solitude because lonely people are easier to manipulate through emotional dependency. But once you learn how to enjoy your own mind, external control weakens dramatically. This is why many people stay constantly distracted. Noise protects them from self-confrontation. Music, scrolling, drama, constant conversation, endless stimulation. Anything to avoid sitting quietly with themselves long enough to discover who they really are. But when you finally sit in silence long enough, you begin hearing truths your old identity tried to suppress. You realize some relationships were built entirely on your weakness. You realize some friendships only survived because you lacked boundaries. You realize some people preferred the exhausted version of you because exhaustion made you easier to control. And this realization can feel painful, even brutal, because awakening often destroys illusions before it builds wisdom. But destruction is not always negative. Sometimes your old identity must collapse for your real personality to emerge. A forest sometimes needs fire before new growth becomes possible. In the same way, your emotional breakdowns may have been psychological reconstruction without you realizing it. Every betrayal sharpened your perception. Every disappointment strengthened your independence. Every lonely night forced you to build emotional endurance. The pain was not random. It was shaping the person you were becoming. And perhaps the most frightening part of this entire transformation is realizing how powerful human beings actually are once they stop lying to themselves. Most limits people accept are psychological. They are inherited fears repeated so many times they begin feeling like reality. You are too weak. You are too emotional. You are not leadership material. You will never change. You need others to survive. But what happens when you stop believing those voices? What happens when the fearful identity loses control over your mind? A different person begins emerging, a focused person, a disciplined person, a calm person, a dangerous person. Not dangerous because they seek destruction, dangerous because they cannot easily be controlled anymore. And the world treats uncontrollable people differently. Some admire them, some fear them, some secretly envy them, some try desperately to pull them back into insecurity. Because your transformation forces others to confront themselves. Your discipline exposes their excuses. Your silence exposes their chaos. Your self-respect exposes where they abandoned themselves. Never underestimate how uncomfortable your growth can make insecure people feel. That is why true transformation often requires isolation for a period of time, not permanent loneliness, temporary separation, space to rebuild your identity without constant interference from people attached to your old self. In isolation, something extraordinary happens. Your thoughts become clearer, your instincts become sharper, your emotional reactions slow down, your goals become more precise, and eventually, you stop asking the world for permission to become who you were meant to be. You begin understanding that confidence was never something other people could give you. It was something built every time you kept a promise to yourself, every workout completed when you wanted to quit, every difficult conversation you stopped avoiding, every moment you chose long-term growth over temporary comfort. Confidence is not created by praise, it is created by evidence. And the hidden person inside you has been collecting evidence for years. Evidence that you survived pain you once thought would destroy you. Evidence that you adapted to environments that nearly broke your spirit. Evidence that even after disappointment, betrayal, exhaustion, and emotional collapse, you are still here, still thinking, still evolving, still fighting. Most people never recognize their own resilience because they are too focused on what they lost instead of what surviving transformed them into. But survival changes the nervous system, it changes perception, it changes priorities. After enough pain, you stop chasing shallow things. You stop worshiping attention. You stop trying to impress people who do not even respect themselves. Something inside you matures. You become quieter but internally stronger. You become more selective with your energy. You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. You realize peace is expensive and not everyone deserves access to it. This is why emotionally evolved people often appear mysterious. They no longer reveal every thought, every emotion, every plan. They understand that privacy protects energy. The weak version of you wanted everyone to understand you. The stronger version understands that misunderstanding is sometimes protection. Not every battle deserves your explanation. Not every criticism deserves your defense. Not every opinion deserves your emotional reaction. Imagine how powerful your life becomes the moment you stop emotionally responding to every external stimulus. That is when mental clarity begins, because most people are psychologically fragmented. Their attention is owned by notifications, opinions, fears, comparisons, and emotional impulses. But focused individuals reclaim their minds. They decide where their attention goes, and attention is power. Whatever controls your attention controls your life. That is why modern systems constantly compete for your focus. A distracted mind is easier to manipulate. A disciplined mind becomes dangerous. When you truly begin changing internally, you notice something strange. Your tolerance for self-deception disappears. Excuses that once comforted you now sound pathetic. You begin recognizing how often fear disguised itself as logic. I'm waiting for the right time. I'm not ready yet. Maybe later. But deep down, you know the truth. Most hesitation is fear wearing intelligent clothing. And once you see that, your relationship with fear changes forever. You stop trying to eliminate fear completely. Instead, you train yourself to move despite it. Courage is not emotional comfort. Courage is action while uncomfortable. The hidden person inside you understands this. That version of you is not fearless. It simply values freedom more than comfort, and freedom requires sacrifice. You may lose certain relationships when you stop tolerating disrespect. You may lose approval when you stop performing for others. You may lose temporary comfort when you choose discipline, but you gain something infinitely more valuable: ownership over yourself. Most people belong to external forces. Their mood depends on attention. Their confidence depends on validation. Their identity depends on social acceptance. But the moment you become internally anchored, your entire reality changes. You stop being psychologically owned by the environment around you, and that is when your presence becomes powerful without effort. You no longer chase attention because you are no longer empty inside. Many people try to appear powerful externally because internally they feel weak. Loud voices, constant showing off, endless need for recognition. But true internal strength is usually quiet. It does not need performance. A lion does not need to announce itself every minute to remind the forest who it is, and neither do you. The most dangerous people in history were often calm thinkers, observers, strategists, individuals capable of emotional control under pressure, because panic destroys intelligence, emotional chaos destroys precision, but a calm mind under pressure becomes almost unstoppable. This is why mastering yourself is more important than controlling others. If someone can manipulate your emotions easily, they control your decisions. If someone can provoke you easily, they control your focus. If someone can tempt you easily, they control your discipline. Self-mastery breaks those chains. And perhaps this is why your hidden self frightens you so much. Because deep down, you know how powerful you could become if you fully committed to your evolution. You know your current life is only a fraction of your potential. You know there are habits you still need to destroy, fears you still need to confront, addictions you still need to outgrow. But you also know something else now. The person capable of doing all of that already exists within you. You are not building a powerful identity from nothing. You are uncovering one buried beneath years of fear, conditioning, insecurity, and emotional survival. That person has always been there, waiting, watching, growing quietly in the dark. And one day, if you continue this path long enough, people will say you changed completely. They will say you became colder, more distant, more intense. But what they are really witnessing is the moment you stopped abandoning yourself just to remain acceptable to everyone else. They are witnessing self-respect replacing dependency, awareness replacing illusion, discipline replacing emotional chaos. And the terrifying part is this transformation is still only beginning. Because once a human being truly discovers their internal power, there is no returning to unconscious weakness again. The mind cannot unsee truth once it has awakened to it. And somewhere deep inside you, the person you feared for years is no longer hiding anymore. And maybe that is the real reason this journey changes people forever. Because once you meet the strongest version of yourself, the version that survived everything silently, the version that learned how to think clearly through emotional storms, the version that no longer collapses every time life becomes difficult, you realize that your greatest enemy was never the world around you. It was the fear of becoming who you truly are. For years, you thought your intensity was a problem, your deep thinking was a problem, your emotional sensitivity was a problem, your desire for solitude was a problem. But now you begin seeing these things differently. The same mind that once overthought everything can become deeply aware. The same emotional depth that once caused suffering can become emotional intelligence. The same solitude that once felt painful can become inner peace. Your darkness was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to transform you. And perhaps the strongest people are not those who were born fearless, but those who face themselves honestly and refuse to run anymore. Because facing yourself is one of the hardest psychological battles a human being can experience. It requires admitting uncomfortable truths. It requires discipline when nobody is watching. It requires rebuilding your identity without applause or recognition. But slowly, day after day, you become someone different. Someone calmer, sharper, harder to manipulate, more connected to reality, more connected to yourself. And eventually, the same people who once underestimated you begin feeling your presence before you even speak. Not because you became arrogant, but because your energy stopped asking for permission to exist. That is the power of internal transformation. It is invisible at first, silent at first, but over time it changes your posture, your decisions, your standards, your relationships, and your future. One decision at a time, you become the person you once thought only existed in your imagination. And maybe tonight, after this video ends, you will sit alone for a few minutes and realize something important. The person you feared was never a monster, never a villain, never something evil hiding inside you. It was your untapped strength, your self-respect, your discipline, your intelligence, your independence, your ability to survive without begging the world to save you. And now that you have seen it, you cannot completely forget it anymore. If this video spoke to something deep inside you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who needs this message, turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next journey, and write in the comments, "I found my real self." Because the moment you stop fearing your inner power, your entire life begins to change.